Welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today, I'm honored to have on Seraphina Capranos. Welcome to the show, Seraphina.
Thank you so much. Such an honor to be here.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and the flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Absolutely. I'm excited to get to know you a little bit more. Why don't we start from the beginning? I read in your bio that you learned about herbal medicine from at least a couple of your grandparents. I'd love to hear about more about your relationship with your grandparents and what they taught you about herbal medicine.
Absolutely. So my grandparents came from a small village in Europe, and they immigrated to Canada with my mom when she was 7. And they lived in this village where they didn't have a medical doctor, and you needed to know how to take care of your family. There was a midwife who knew the way of herbs. And so my grandparents just grew up with the culture of having to take care of yourselves. That's what their parents did. My grandmother was born in the same house on the same kitchen table as her mother. And then my mother, the same midwife, delivered my mom also in
Wow.
that same house. So 3 generations in one house. So that gives you a sense of how they lived. And so when they emigrated to Canada, they brought that tradition of having to take care of yourself and essentially be your own doctor. And I always like to say to my students when I tell my story that it wasn't because my family's anti-establishment. It was just because that's what they knew, and that's how they had to roll. And so as I was growing up, my mom brought that same philosophy and that same culture to our family. So I had never really seen a doctor until I became an adult. And again, it was just merely because herbs worked. It was very practical. I'm in my 40s. I've never had an antibiotic, and I would take one if I needed one, but herbs have been there. So they're spiritual nourishment for me, and they're still my first line of medicine. And so that's my mother's parents. And I learned how to make cough syrups. After dinner, we always had linden and sage tea. Some of my best childhood memories are sitting under the linden trees in front of my grandparents' home and watching the bees and smelling that fragrance. So plants have always been part of my life. And then when I was 16, I had a spinal injury. And at the same time, my dad was dying. It was a very difficult time in life. And once again, herbs were there to soothe, to repair, to restore, to manage pain. And so, yeah, I was literally raised by plants.
I love that you use the word practicality. That's kind of the word that was floating in my head as well. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to instill upon my daughter. Like I always say, I hope she takes herbalism for granted. Like it just is a part of her general lifestyle. And it kind of sounds like that's what it was like for you. Besides linden, were there other plants that you kind of recall from childhood that really attracted you?
Yeah, I mean, sage and rosemary and elderberry. Elderberry is a big one. So my grandfather was born in Prussia, and my grandmother lived on the border of France and Germany. And elderberries, that was part of their world. And it was actually Rosemary Gladstar who taught me that elderberry wasn't a thing in North America until I think she said like the 90s or something. And that's because of the European influence. But my grandparents had an elderberry tree behind their house. And so I got to know elderberry growing up in Ontario, Canada. And then lots of garlic, lots of eating raw garlic, even swallowing whole cloves of garlic raw. Yeah.
uh, when I first started getting into herbalism, I want to say you're just sparking my memory right now. I want to say garlic was the first time I really realized that herbs work. Not to get too graphic, but I was a basketball player, and I had this interesting like fungus growth on my like under my armpit, and it was like super disgusting. And I remember just chewing on a ton of raw garlic, and lo and behold, like the next day it disappeared.
It
I'm
really
pretty sure herbs
works.
work. Yeah.
Yeah. My mom,
Sorry, dear audience, that I just put that image in your brain, but
no, it's
it's
great. This is how we learn, right? We
that's
share these
right.
kinds of stories. This is like what it's like in the field. My mom and grandma used to tape or they would slice garlic cloves in half and then tape them to the bottom of the feet if you had a cold or a flu. And I don't know if this is tech. I've actually never looked this up, even in all my clinical training. But my grandmother would say it would just pull the virus right out of you. And so we'd sleep with these juicy garlic cloves on our feet, but we were better the next day.
Sure. Yeah. And then your breath would probably smell like garlic by it going through the bloodstream.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Who else have been some of your herbal mentors along the way?
Mm. So in the 90s, I did spend some time at Susan Weed's at the Wise Woman Center in upstate New York. So she was definitely an influence. And then one of my teachers, Michael Vertoli, who's in Canada, in Ontario, he's incredible. Aviva Ram was a major influence in my 20s. My gosh, I wanted to be a midwife. So I read every book of hers voraciously. I did her herbal program before the internet when she'd mail it to you in snail mail and get those large binders. And of course, Rosemary Gladstar. She was one of the few who wrote a book about herbs for women. Again, I think that was 94, 95-ish it came out. So I was just consuming all those books at that time. And then my family's always been probably the primary influence. And I've had so many other teachers along the way. Amanda McQuaid Crawford, she's remarkable. Torona Lodog, of course. There's so many. But in terms of the key influencing teachers, I would say Susan Weed, as I was coming of age, as I was becoming a young adult, Amanda McQuaid Crawford, Aviva Ram, Michael Vertoli. Those are some of my favorites. Also, Robin DePasquale. I'm not sure if you know her, but she's a naturopath.
I know the name for sure.
Yeah, a naturopath and a herbalist. I used to call her and have mentorships sessions with her in my early years of practice. So I believe my philosophy is to listen, to gather around as many teachers as you can, right? To learn. And even if they have so-called oppositional opinions, that alone is medicine for you to be able to develop your own ability to think critically and develop conclusions on your own. So all those teachers that I named, they don't necessarily even hold the same philosophy in herbal medicine, the same approach. They have very different backgrounds, different education, but that helped me develop my own way of thinking and draw my own conclusions because it gave me the opportunity to explore different methods in my own clinical practice. So I love to sit at the feet of elders and teachers still today. Chanchelle Cabrera, she's someone I have to name. She's now a dear friend. And we have a study group monthly that a few of us get together and hash out cases. So yeah, I love the diversity in our herbal community.
Oh yeah. Just thinking about all the different teachers you named, I've definitely had a lot of influences from each one of them. I'm drinking a marshmallow infusion right now, and I credit Susan Weed for a lot of the infusions that I drink on a daily basis. And we're trying to get Aviva Ram on the show. There's been a lot of email back and forth, so that's going to happen soon enough. But where are you based, Seraphina?
I now live on a small island called Salt Spring Island in British Columbia in Canada. So that's in the Salish Sea on the West Coast. If you're in the United States, we're just north of Washington State.
So when you're meeting up with Chanchelle, then that must be in person, then I suppose.
Well, once or twice a year, it's in person,
Okay.
but we meet on Zoom. There's 4 of us and we meet on Zoom once a month, but I am fortunate enough to live in the same bioregion as her. She lives on a different island than I do.
Gotcha. Okay. So part of your bio, from what I read, is you're an herbalist, a homeopath, and a ritualist. I kind of wanted to delve into both of those other two. Can you tell us more about your homeopathic practice?
Yeah. So back then, when I was a teen and I was exploring herbs and making all kinds of recipes and diving into books in the 90s, I suffered this spinal injury. And in fact, I was essentially bedridden for months. And what got me back on my feet was a lot of tonifying herbs, but also seeing a homeopath. And I was skeptical of homeopathy, right? I come from a herbal family. I'm used to the sensuality and the color and the fragrance and growing your herbs and touching them and feeling them. And I was like, what are these little white pills? I'm not into this at all. However, it was homeopathy that literally, I would say within 3 days, decreased my pain by 50%. And then with consistent treatment over a year, I was back on my feet, and that was over 25 years ago. And I've never had a relapse since. And it was homeopathy. So I was intrigued. And I was also a pretty vigilant environmentalist back then. And one of my one concern at the time was how much plant material I needed to be making medicine, how much alcohol I had to go through, how much equipment, how much supplies. And in my early 20s, when I left home, I was living on the road, living off of basically no money. And my mind kept going back to homeopathy. And as I dove into it, I thought, wait a minute, these remedies are made from plants. And when I got to visit my first homeopathic lab, I saw that it was like one small harvest of plants makes thousands and thousands of remedies that can last over years. And so my low budget, poor, living on the road environmentalist self was like, hey, wait a minute, there's something to this. And I had experienced the efficacy of it firsthand. So I applied. I wrote a school in Vancouver, Canada, in the year 2000, and I essentially begged them to take me because I was not yet 21, and you needed an undergrad degree. And I wrote them this compelling letter, and I showed up on their doorstep, and I all but begged them to please take me. And I was the youngest student. The next youngest student was in her 40s. It was a program, a 4-year program for dentists and veterinarians and all these existing health professionals. But I guess it was fate. They took me, and it completely changed my life. And for me, learning homeopathy, this is classical homeopathy I'm talking about. It was like this mind-opening, mind-bending experience of learning the heart and soul of plants. And maybe one day this will happen, but I've always longed to teach herbalists homeopathy, and I've always longed to teach homeopaths herbalism, because I see them as like they're two sides of the same coin. And homeopathy is profound. It's still my favorite modality to work with primarily, and I use both in my clinic. And I could share more about how I do that later, but sure. Homeopathy is incredible, is what I'll say. And it's an incredible way to get to know plants, is by reading those homeopathic materia medicas. And if you go back, certainly in the United States, to the early eclectic physicians and what we now know as naturopaths, but prior to naturopathic medicine formalizing, those practitioners, those early root doctors and early naturopathic doctors, they used both. And much of our herbal literature, written by some practitioners, is drawn from the old homeopathic materia medicas, because they were doing so much kind of controlled studies amongst their peers and their students. So yeah, it's incredible. Using the two together is incredible.
Just a quick break from the show to thank our presenting sponsor, Oshala Farm. Oshala Farm is a beautiful and vibrant certified organic herb farm based in Southern Oregon, where they grow and sell over 80 different plant species. The founders, Elise and Jeff Higley, have been longtime friends, so I highly trust their growing methods and ethics. You'll love the potency and vibrancy of all the herbs they have to offer. To learn more and purchase their herbs and other organic goods, head to oshalafarm.com. So thanks once again to Oshala Farm for sponsoring the Herbalist Hour. Now back to the show. Enjoy. I guess I'm going to show my ignorance here now. Is there any overlap between, say, homeopathy and, say, flower essences? Or is there anything going on there?
It's a great question. Yeah. There is an overlap, and that is that Dr. Edward Bach, it's written Bach, but pronounced Bach, he was a physician and he was a homeopath, and he lived in the time, he was the originator of the flower essences and what are called the Bach flower essences. And he lived in a time when homeopathy was prominent, and a lot of physicians were practicing homeopathy then. And when he was sick, he went to his little cottage in the woods, and he sat with flowers, but he knew how to make homeopathic remedies. They're not, flower essences are similar, but they're not homeopathic remedies. Where they are similar is through the dilution method. So without getting too technical, the flower essences are similar in the way that they're diluted and succussed, but not exactly. But he did borrow that methodology from the practice of homeopathy.
I've never heard succus in the past tense before. Succussed. Is that what you did there? Okay.
Yeah, also succussed.
Go for it.
Yeah, it's a method of shaking. It's the way that you success a remedy. Yeah.
Also didn't know it was botch. I always said Bach in my head. So, well, I'm learning all sorts of new things here. Can you tell us what a ritualist is?
Yeah. So, kind of during this turbulent, my late teens, early 20s, I was experiencing all these health crises. And then what was also happening is my mother's a very powerful healer. And in my teens, as I was going through all these health crises and my father was ill and dying, I was receiving a lot of energy healing and a lot of energy work. And my mother is very intuitive. So is her father, my grandfather. And I started having just these, I guess you could call them like prophetic moments. And it freaked me out. Like I was freaked out. And I just wanted to be a normal teen. I wanted to like drink and do drugs and party. I didn't get to do any of that as a teen. Okay. I was like in bed, chronic pain, working with a whole bunch of healers. And I met a shamanic practitioner at that time. And she said, yeah, you have psychic abilities. And what's happening is you don't know how to control it. So there I was as a teen, instead of partying and doing drugs and drinking, I was learning how to control my highly intuitive abilities. And I then apprenticed with what you would now call a psychic medical medium, basically. Although none of these women used those terms back then. So fast track a couple more years, I met some priestesses in a lineage called the Reclaiming Tradition. And the Reclaiming Tradition is not Wicca. It's not dogmatic. All genders are welcome. And it's a lineage of many different cultures essentially merging. And it was in my early 20s that I ended up kind of accidentally stumbling into priestess work and essentially learning the art of ritual, being a ritualist, which is a ceremonialist. So after many years of apprenticing, I learned how to preside over funerals, over weddings. What would you say? Any kind of rites of passage practice. And that became a huge part of my life because I needed that medicine after the trauma of my father dying in the way that he died, after my own illness and accident. I was longing for a way to somehow metabolize all these big experiences. How do you metabolize trauma? How do you process trauma through the body? And this again is where I think herbalism is so brilliant, and homeopathy, in this intersection of helping our soul catch up and make sense of big experiences. And if you look back through time, the arc of time, into ancient myths and fairy tales even, have you ever noticed that a lot of those ancient cultures for which those myths and stories arise, there's these agricultural ceremonies where people are sacrificing wheat, or they're ceremonializing and ritualizing the act of moving from winter solstice into early spring. And so there's this movement of time of where ancient cultures would emotionally go through a kind of emotional catharsis through the story, and also tie that into a land-based ceremony. So that spoke to me as a young woman who had experienced, by the time I was in my early 20s, a significant, and I'm skipping over a lot of big events in life, deaths and accidents and losses and heartbreaks. And so ritual was like a balm to my soul. And as somebody who is very sensitive and I can see and sense things, I needed that. I needed a way to feel my own belonging. And then I found that in a community. And because I'm service oriented and I'm here on the planet to serve others, I eventually, over many, many years, apprenticed and learned how to become an initiated priestess myself, where I come into someone's life and maybe it's illness or accident, or maybe it's something wonderful like a birth or rite of passage ceremony. And I'll facilitate those rituals. And I mainly do a lot of facilitation for large groups, like hundreds of people.
Wow.
In communities, healing rituals, winter solstice, summer solstice, Samhain. And it's a significant part of my life. It's nothing I ever thought I would do. And it's not something I necessarily sought to do, but it's kind of where life has taken me.
Yeah, I noticed on your website, yeah, homeopathy, herbalist, ritualist. I love that those are like your three pillars, and you just kind of put it out there, and those are your specialties, and it all came from wanting to help yourself. And you seem like you said, a person of service. So then you want to teach others and help others. And yeah, I just think that's really neat. And I feel like a lot of herbalists kind of come to the same conclusion, as they want to heal themselves, and then they're like, oh, I got to share this with everybody else. Kind of like tracing it back to when you were younger, like say a budding herbalist and whatnot. What was the progression like from like an apprentice, now teaching, leading masses and rituals and whatnot? When did you like start growing in your power to start, doing this with hundreds of people?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one foot in front of the other. So
Okay.
it was when I finally got my footing as a practitioner, as a clinician. I was in my mid 20s, which is pretty young. And now that I think back, I marvel at how young I was.
Yeah.
And I started to do, and this is what I always encourage my students to do, is I just taught my first class, like a group of 6 people, herbs for cough and colds. And then my first ritual was in my community here for somebody had died quite tragically. And I thought, okay, the witch's New Year's, October 31st, let's have a little community ceremony. It was very small. And then slowly over time, consistency, and that's important. I was offering classes consistently. So it was 6 people, my first class, then it was 8. And then a year later, it was 18. And then a year after that, it was 25. And it kind of just began to develop its own life. And again, for all the budding herbalists out there, consistency is key. So making yourself known in community and handing out, back then it was handing out flyers at the local health food stores and community centers and mom and baby classes, because I wanted to be a midwife, and Aviva Ram was my superhero in my 20s. I was all over letting all the midwives know and all the doulas know who I was, what I was offering. And I actually taught many classes for doulas. I even taught at the midwifery college when I was around 30. So consistency, showing up, letting people know who you are. And again, I wasn't on any ambitious teaching track. I was just so excited. And I wanted everyone to know all these incredible remedies and recipes that I was not only learning, but I was implementing in my practice. And I could see the change. I could see that it actually work. And that's what motivated me. And then, I would say, they say there's some kind of law around 7 years or 10 years, and that makes you an expert. I don't know if that's true. I will forever be learning. However, it was after maybe 7 or 10 years of practice and doing it, everything I'm explaining here, that finally Pacific Rim College, which is the nearest herbal school to where I live, in 2010, they reached out to me and said, hey, would you like to teach? And so that began to happen, right? And so my world began to open and expand because I'm service oriented. And I think that's an important piece, no matter what we do as a career, is I was serving community. I also want to say, because this is a strong value of mine, is I donate maybe 20% of everything I do. So free classes, serving the unhoused community, serving women on the street, pregnant women on the street. I was a doula for many years, offering free services to those who couldn't afford those services. So that's a huge value of mine. And I was also doing that whenever I could. And I still do that today. There's a portion of my practice where I don't charge. I'm not in a city where I have the infrastructure to have a free clinic, but so I do it in my own way. So I was very active in serving in all kinds of way. And I think that not only as a budding herbalist, it gives you the experience, and then you get to see a wide variety of people. And that's really important, I think, as a herbalist. And because again, I live in an area where I don't have access to free clinics or a lot of the gatherings you have in the United States, and festivals, I was doing it in my own way. And then the other great thing about all this is that you meet colleagues and peers. And that's so important too, as a budding herbalist, is to build your community so that you have people that you can call up and say, hey, I'm seeing this weird fungal infection. How do you treat this? What would you do?
When you're hearkening back to my garlic. Okay. We'll keep that image going in the audience's mind. When you say you donate 20% of your practice, I think that's really cool, by the way. It kind of reminds me of like, say, a tithe or something
Yeah.
like that. That's really neat. Keeps the good energy flowing. Do you like actually kind of track that, or is it just kind of like a loosey goosey goal of yours, or how does that look for you?
Yeah. Now it's kind of intuitive. So if I'm seeing, like I have an online schedule, but I kind of know, okay, I'm seeing, 30 people this week in clinic. So I know that next week I want to offer this many services or this many free spots. It's not always that linear because frankly, you know how it really turns out, Mason, is that when anyone emails me or asks for a session and they let me know, or a colleague will say, hey, this person's on the street, they really need help. Do you have room? It just seems to work out. So I now, because I'm well established, I have the privilege, and it is a privilege that I can afford to basically turn no one away. And so it just works out that way. There have been times, especially, early COVID, when I was giving more, but I could, right? People are in a lot of crisis, and I was giving as many free sessions as I could. It was probably more than 20% then, but I could because I was teaching a lot at that time. Everyone was online teaching, and I was teaching a lot of big programs. And so I'm like, I can do this right now. It all works out. But yeah, I loosely track it.
Very good. Well, and I do want to get to your online teaching here in a bit, but I want to stay on the ritual train for a minute. It's fall. You seem like a really good person to ask. Do you have any specific, say, fall rituals or practices that you'd like to share, or anything about fall in general that you appreciate about it?
Yeah. So we just crossed past in the Northern Hemisphere, the autumn equinox, and we're moving towards Samhain at the end of October. So this time of year is one where our ancestors, no matter where you live, no matter what culture you're from in the Northern Hemisphere, our ancestors had harvesting rituals and ceremonies. And the point, very simply put, is the purpose of these ceremonies and rituals is to feel our place and our belonging with the earth, because we're not just connected to nature, we are nature. So bringing the harvest into your home is a very simple and yet beautiful practice that I love to do. So altars on your kitchen table. I have altars in my kitchen table where I am now. I have altars on my counters. I have altars behind me there. And it's a way to receive through the unseen world, because that's also what being a ritualist and a priestess is about. It's being in conversation with the unseen world, those forces of nature and that invisible energy that animates all life. We bring that into our home to warm our hearts and to celebrate the harvest. A lot of folks who struggle with this transition, and there are many, they struggle with the lack of light. They get nervous and anxious, maybe even depressed as we move towards winter. What can help is celebrating that harvest, bringing the colorful squashes and pumpkins into your home, bringing those colorful leaves into your home and decorating your home with them as a way to feel that shift of life and to feel that life, we have death, but we also have regeneration. That's also part of the natural cycle. So other rituals are lighting a candle at dinner every night. These are the everyday, these are rituals. People might be thinking, wait a minute, that's not a ritual, but it is. And then depending on where you live, what we do here is we have bonfires, and bonfires where we give the dead plants, like I burn the old rose branches that I pruned and the apple branches that I pruned. We'll give those to the fire. And we do two things. One is to honor and give gratitude for the bounty that we had, for the summer that we had, for the yields that we had, and all the celebration and the beauty and the gatherings that we had of summer. And we thank the sun. And then as we're also giving all that dead wood to the fire, we then make our prayer for this next churning of the wheel. And so we'll ask nature, we'll ask that the world behind this world to feed our spirits and to feed our hearts and to bring that sun energy, that heat into our bodies, so that we may have a good winter where we replenish and we rest and we regenerate. so that we can, once again, when spring comes, bring all that vitality back to our lives. So those are just very simple rituals. Ritual does not have to be complex. You don't have to study it. You don't have to go to school for it. It's really about what makes you feel tied to nature. And then making that connection of how our inner world, what's happening out there in nature is also happening in here in our being.
I guess we've been unknowingly, well, Amanda has been knowingly doing a lot of that already. She's been bringing in all sorts of plants, creating altars. We've been lighting candles every night at dinner time, like you suggested. And we had a bonfire the other night. So those are all really great suggestions. I particularly do love this time of year. I think it's a lot of our favorites.
So can I ask you,
please.
Mason?
Yeah.
How does that make you feel that Amanda's been doing that? The bonfire, the candles, how's that make you feel?
Oh, I just got goosebumps right when you asked me. I mean, it's the beauty alone. Just every corner, every nook and cranny of our house has some sort of beauty going on. Like you said, you're bringing the nature inside, or the bounty inside. It just makes me feel just super happy looking around and seeing all like the goldenrod like crowns that she's making. And I love her intentionality behind it. I want to say it brings so much joy, and just seeing the beauty of it all.
Yeah. And that, thank you for sharing. And I think that what you just said summarizes, and I know this might sound like a big statement, but it summarizes our purpose of that's what it is to be human.
Yeah.
I believe that our purpose is not about how you make money or your career. Our purpose is about how we pour blessings on the earth and how we feel our place amongst the cycle of nature. And so I just love how you summarize that. And again, I know this is kind of a big statement, but I work with a lot of complex conditions in my clinic and a lot of depression and anxiety. And I have observed that when people have those little practices like you and Amanda do, it does bring joy. It's the little things that can create profound shifts inside someone's being. It's the little things, because the little things amount to so much when you do this over and over and over and over, right? We feel our place and our purpose.
Yeah, some people might not know it from my like outward facing, personality or whatever, but I struggle with depression quite a bit. I always have. I want to say just seeing the nooks and crannies and the altars in our house does keep me present, which I've been trying to focus a lot more on. And like typically when I'd walk back from the gym or something like that, I'd have headphones on and I would be listening to, say, a podcast, but I'm making it a practice now to not listen to anything, just to focus on the surrounding. And we live in a really like old town with like a lot of cool houses and nature and stuff like that. So I'm like, why am I trying to distract myself by listening to something every day when I could just take it all in? And it's been so beneficial just to stay present and just really just pay attention to what's going on around me, I guess.
Yeah. And that's when, in my tradition, we say our triple, that gives rise to our triple soul alignment, what you just described. Because depression and anxiety, one aspect of them is that we're either stuck in the past or stuck in the future, right? Anxiety is often stuck in the future. Depression is sometimes stuck in the past. I want to acknowledge I'm making it very simple. So forgive me, everyone who's listening. Sure. But if we were to put it simply, but anything that brings us into the present moment, ritual, ceremony, being with nature, what you just described, we have that alignment can happen, right? And there's an ease in our soul. And there's a way in which our mind, body, heart, soul then comes into that coherence. And coherence is where health lives, right? Coherence is where health lives. And so again, I feel very passionate about this because I've seen it, that is what can help us heal. And that makes it plays a huge role in mental health, is that triple soul alignment.
Can you say more about the coherence that you were just talking about?
Yeah. So I recommend anyone listening to check out the Heart Math Institute. They do such incredible research. And so coherence is when there's a harmony, there's a alignment, you could say. And our heart has its own nervous system. There used to be a time where we thought intuition lived here and our mind was here. It's not. Our mind, you could say, is between every soul in our body. And our heart is actually not only the cardiovascular system, but the heart, the organ, which has its own heart, mind, brain, is where our intuition lives. And there's really cool research. I just posted something on Instagram about this, is that when we breathe, when we are bringing ourselves into presence, what you just described on your walk, I felt like I was on your walk with you. When you're in that kind of presence, not only does our nervous system be able to regulate, but our heart, our mind, our brain then comes into that alignment. We feel better. We can even feel ecstatic or euphoric. And it's a way that we can repattern our nervous system. But here's the other cool thing that the heart math has recently come to, is that our human electromagnetic field then shifts. So if I'm in that heart coherence with you in the room, you will suddenly begin to entrain with my nervous system, right? Have you ever been in the room with someone who's like that? They're just so relaxed. You can kind of feel that they're in that lovely place. Or maybe it's Amanda when she's creating all that beauty in your home. And you go, wow, I just feel better. Huh? And you feel present. It's the electromagnetic field that's shifting. And then the cool thing is that the Heart Math Institute came to some conclusion where our electromagnetic field, when we're in that coherence, can help the Earth's electromagnetic field, which is really incredible.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah. When you think about that, but it makes so much sense. And when you think about shamanic cultures or shamanistic cultures or indigenous cultures of any kind, and they talk about how the way in which we walk on the earth has an actual impact on the earth, it brings it home.
I was actually going to ask you about that later on down in the show, but I'm glad we talked about it now. That was incredible. And yeah, I was just on your Instagram and I saw that. I was like, oh, I have to ask Seraphina about this, but I feel like we're in coherence right now. I'm feeling way more calm right now. So I really appreciate your energy despite being, thousands of miles away and whatnot.
My pleasure. Yeah.
Well, why don't we switch gears a little bit and talk about your upcoming, I don't know if you call it a course or whatever, but it's called The Wild Edge, a feminine path home. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? When this podcast is released, it's going to be happening probably in about a week or so. So why don't you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So it's the culmination of my career and also the career of my co-founder and business partner, Dr. Carly Danoon, who's a naturopathic physician, a very wise woman herself. And where we both meet is in the world of loving plants and recognizing their power and their wisdom, that they're more than just these constituents that do cool things to our anatomy. So it is a program for anyone who identifies as a woman. And it's essentially a way to wake up your own inner wise woman, because having worked primarily with women, that just statistically is who shows up for healthcare in most providers' offices. What we have found is that women often have people, and especially women, because that's our demographic, are in tune and in touch with, they have a deep, powerful inner knowing. And that's kind of what you and I have just touched on briefly. Is you have an inner knowing that guides you on your walks, and every woman, every person has that inner knowing. And when we listen to that inner knowing, that's when we come into that heart coherence I'm talking about. And that's also when we can make decisions. Well, let me just back up. Imagine, Mason, if people made decisions from that place, right? Imagine if we all made life decisions from that kind of coherent place, that heart, mind, body coherence. That's pretty powerful. And so that's the kind of revolution that we're wanting to birth, is that women, especially because they tend to be the providers, the caregivers, the mothers, the sisters, the doctors, the communitarians. We want to start that revolution where women are so deeply in touch with their inner wise woman, and they make decisions from that place for their own health, for the healthcare and the well-being of their family, friends, peers, and community. And then we get that message even deeper into the world. So practically what it is, it's a program. It's taught over 8 weeks, so there's enough content to keep you busy for a lot longer than that. And it's a combination of body wisdom lectures taught by Dr. Carly Denoon from that medical, but also that wise woman approach. And then it is beautiful videos on medicine making, specific recipes. I offer the monographs or the plant wisdom based on my clinical experience, both combining the physiological, the herbal actions, all the stuff you want in a monograph, but also the plant spirit essence, the deeper teachings and the mysticism of a plant. And then I read you myths and stories that connect to these plants, just like I was speaking earlier, how there's a lot of wisdom in stories, and they can myth and folk tales, they reveal hidden truths. And if you've ever heard a story, it kind of can wake something up in you. And that's because there's wisdom encoded in these myths and folk tales. So we bring that in. And then we bring in ritualistic practices that you can bring into your own life as a way to help metabolize your life and as a way for you to bring ritual into your everyday life and also to bring it into communities. So this program is designed for every woman, every person identifies as a woman, and especially or including those who want to start their own women's circles, who are already herbalists or practitioners or doctors or physicians, and they want to bring this wise woman approach into their practice in a grounded way. And kind of merge those skills of myth, folklore, ritual, body wisdom, herbal medicine, and wrap it all up. And the reason we kind of packaged all those modalities together is because of my career being an international teacher for 15 years. I find that that's what women crave. They want that multidimensionality of life. People want that. People want the multidimensionality of life. And so we offer this program as a way to deeply empower women and awaken their own inner wise woman so that they can bring it into their own lives and also facilitate it for others.
I was just hanging out with a couple friends, a married couple. The man always has a monthly man circle, and then the woman has like a monthly woman circle. And you brought up that's one of your goals with the program is to help women create and start these women's circles. Can you maybe go into a little bit of detail about that? Like maybe give the audience an idea on how someone could start a women's circle, or maybe the importance of having these women's circles, and I guess the frequency of them as well.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I've had one once a week. I've had them once monthly. I've had them every 6 or 8 weeks. And I think we're social primates, human beings. We need to be together. We learn together. I think that's why podcasts are so important and so they're so popular. Is we need to share our wisdom together, and the container, and that's what it is. It's an intentional container to gather. So you're dropping down out of just chit chat, that superficial conversation that can often inspire social anxiety. And we drop down into that place of what's really going on. And not only to air our troubles and our worries and our fears, although that's included, but in a circle, wisdom rises, especially when we drop down and we speak from the heart. So a woman's circle or any kind of intentional circle is one that has an intention. Somebody is holding that strength of that container in loose facilitation. And it's a way to take a theme. Themes are helpful, right? So then we can kind of have a focal point. And then we essentially share the wisdom in the room. And we can do that through sharing a story. And I think that's a beautiful way. So in a group I've been gathering with for 20 years, we always work with a goddess as a way to reveal a teaching and as a way to have a conversation starter of sorts, and then unpack that story and see how we can see ourselves in that story. And then what I also like to bring in is a plant, right? How cool is that when you get together with some people and then you taste a plant? And then once again, if you're tasting a nervine, maybe the conversation will come to anxiety and depression. And how do you navigate that? And then it becomes a council where you're exchanging wisdom. and you're exchanging intelligence. And I think that is so healing, right? It's not about one person, the facilitator, having all the answers. It is not that. It's about exchanging and that transfer of knowledge that can happen in a gathering. And so then everyone feels empowered. Everyone feels in touch with their own wisdom. And their words are medicine. And there is wisdom and medicine in hearing yourself say something that you needed to hear. Right? Have you ever had that experience?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll share it right here, right now, but it's definitely happened to me before. I
Yeah.
don't know if I'll go into the specifics, but yeah, I was just a part of my friend's man group a few weeks ago, and yeah, like being empowered to say what's going on and to receive the other's wisdom as well. It was humbling, but it was also, it made me feel not so alone. And you're just doing really great work, Seraphina. I'm super excited that you're presenting this program. Can you tell people where to learn more about it and everything?
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Instagram is good, Seraphina.Capranos.
Yeah.
And then our website is the Center for Sacred Arts.
Cool.
And those are probably the two best places to find me and us. And I just want to, you said something very powerful, and I need to kind of circle back to that. And that
Please.
is,
And I didn't want to make it sound like we're wrapping up here or
no,
anything
that's
like
cool.
that. Okay,
No,
cool.
no. No, I didn't feel that. I just wanted to not lose my train of thought. And
Please don't. Yeah.
that is that I have, without exaggeration, because I've been doing this so long, sat with people, men and women in all genders, for 20 years. And I've been teaching internationally. I may not be big, splashy all over the internet, but I've been big and out there in the world, more face to face with people. And if there's anything I've heard that's a commonality, and it's very humbling, is that everyone feels alone. And that to me has been so moving and powerful and emotional, that I've sat with thousands of people, and the common thread is everyone feels alone. That's the thing that binds us. And my job, my mission, is to bring intimacy back into people's worlds. And that's why I've been a circle holder, a ritualist. I hold circles. In the most plain language, that's what I do as a ritualist and as a teacher. And if only people could recognize that we're together in this aloneness. And that's the medicine of circles. And I'm glad you were sitting in a men's group. And I want everyone to have that kind of experience, because it's as old as time. Sitting together, it used to be around a fire or in a cave. It's as old as time. And it's what we're made for. And you're doing your own version of that by hosting this podcast, right? And I bet you it's medicinal for your heart in some
Oh
ways.
yeah, big time. Especially since I moved from the Northwest to Wisconsin, where, I theoretically left a bunch of my friends and family, and but now twice a week I get to have these conversations. So it definitely is medicine. And I will say that man's group was around a fire, which also made, it feel really nice. And then after the whole thing was over, I told one of the guys, I was like, you guys are just so lucky to have this, And he's like, you could start one yourself in your own neck of the woods. So I'm working on making friends. I made a couple the other day, so we'll see, but definitely medicine.
Or, just put a poster out there. I'm not kidding. Like, one of my best friend is a guy, and that's what he did. When he moved to a new town, he just literally put a poster up and put men's group and a few little words. And, that's how he developed his friendship of 25. He's got a men's group of 25 years. It's been happening.
That's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see if I do that.
Yeah. Email me. I'm happy to give you any tips.
Sure.
But I just wanted to say that it reminds us of what it means to be human. And that's why it's so important. And it is the antidote to this spell of loneliness that we've got going on in the modern world. No one is alone in it. And I want to just emphasize that to anyone and everyone listening. You are not alone in your aloneness. It's a cultural spell, or I would even say a cultural hex. And the way to break that hex is to get together and to do what what you just said, right? Like make it happen. And it's deep medicine for our soul.
Well, I just got to shout out my good friend Giuseppe Spadafora, who's the free tea guy. He's known as the free tea guy. He traveled the U.S. for about 15 years, going from community to community and just setting up in his tiny bus and serving free tea to people. And the reason he did it was because he felt lonely. And, after 15 years, he's got hundreds of friends all over the nation, and I don't think he feels so lonely anymore. So we actually do have an interview coming out with him in about a month. I was able to record it in person with him, and I think it's going to be very inspirational to people and kind of in line with this conversation right here.
Very cool. I'm going to look him up. That's awesome.
Absolutely. I want to say it's freeteaparty.org, but
that's so good, and just such a good example of be the thing that you desire, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Be the change you wish to see in the world, as they say.
You got it. I love that. That's a good one. Yes.
Well, I would like to hear more about your relationship with, is it Dr. Carly?
Yeah. Dr. Carly Janoon. She's a naturopathic physician who also lives in British Columbia. And she's a very intelligent, multifaceted woman and a great teacher. So what's interesting about us is I've spent my life kind of in the mystical realm. I didn't get into it, but I did a 10-year shamanic apprenticeship. I've done a lot of, life took me in that direction. And life took her in the opposite direction, where she's also very intuitive and in touch with the invisible world. And yet she went to regular medical school. And then she was an athlete, had a terrible accident, ended up in a wheelchair, got herself out of the wheelchair, which is pretty incredible, skiing accident. And then she ended up going to naturopathic school and became a naturopathic physician. And for those listening, in Canada, naturopathic physicians are kind of like medical doctors. They can act as primary physicians. They can do all kinds of physical exams. I think it's a little different in the United States and elsewhere. So she has worked as a primary physician and was prescribing drugs because that's what she could do. She has a license to do so, prescribing pharmaceuticals. And she crashed and she thought, my gosh, all I'm doing is handing out antibiotics and antidepressants, which is cool and necessary when they're applicable. But she got overwhelmed, and she had basically her own health crisis stopped her in her tracks, and she became a mother and realized she wanted to be working primarily from that wise woman way. And we both live rurally, although we're far away from one another. So we have this deep relationship to the wild lands and where we live. And so we joined forces, and I had been teaching and traveling the world and wanting to found a school called the Center for Sacred Arts. And she stepped in and became my co-founder. And our mission truly is to remember what it means to be human. And basically everything you and I have been talking about, the multidimensionality of what it means to be human, because that is our way out of this global crisis. And also my devotion is to the land and also specifically human beings. And I see the suffering, I see the soul anxiety of human beings and the loneliness we were just talking about. And my mission is to bring the magic, the belonging, the deep medicine that people need. And that's what we're doing together through the Center for Sacred Arts. Think about the wild edge. It's that place of change and transition, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a metaphor. But yeah, our program, that's the flagship program.
Gotcha.
From the Wild Edge is kind of our first bigger project together. Is this program, The Wild Edge.
So you're clearly doing amazing work, and I highly encourage you to check it out this year. But I have to ask, because there'll probably be a week from when this releases to when it launches, will this be an annual thing? Because podcasts live on forever. So if you're listening to this a year from now, is someone going to be able to check it out again?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Very good. Yeah. I also do want to say y'all were kind enough to give HerbRally listeners a discount code, and you could save 5% with coupon code HerbRally at checkout. So again, that's centerforsacredarts.com. You can also learn more about Seraphina at seraphinacapranos.com as well, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Sweet, but we're still not out of here yet, because I did have some more questions for you
Go
that
for
I
it.
definitely wanted to get to. But was there something else you wanted to like wrap up? Speaking about the program, I didn't want to cut you off there.
No, I think I got it. Yeah, I think I said
Awesome.
all that I needed to. Thank you.
Good. Well, dear listener, all links will be in the podcast show notes and the YouTube description, because we're also available on YouTube. So, yeah, speaking of your Instagram account from earlier, you had a post that said, I'm sorry, this was from your website. Accept that joy and fulfillment are not reserved for some time in the future, but available to you now. And again, this kind of goes to a lot of the things we've already been talking about, but I just really loved how you put that and was just hoping you could kind of expound upon that.
Yeah, well, that's that coherence that I'm talking
Yeah.
about. Like, so much of our mental anguish and suffering is trying to get somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's been bred into us from this capitalistic world that we're living in, right?
Yeah.
But what if it's right here, right now? And I think it's a radical revolution. And I think it's anti capitalistic to call that in right now, right? The fact that we have food, we have water, we have this body. Even living with an illness does not mean that you can't be healthy, right? Like you can live with a chronic condition and still be healthy. Health is not defined by the absence of disease. Health is defined by the freedom and the liberation that we find within our condition, right? So I'm all about turning our perspective upside down, because I think that is healing, is shifting our frame of reference. And so joy and fulfillment can be here right now when we align our heart, mind, spirit, soul, that triple soul alignment. We can call that into ourselves by being in the present moment. And I've sat with people on their dying days. I've sat with people when they're heading out of this life. And even that, I'm not being overly poetic by saying this. Even in those moments, people can feel their health, their freedom, their liberation, and their joy by being present with what is, right? But we've been indoctrinated and domesticated into these false definitions of what joy, fulfillment, and satisfaction is by the overculture. And that is not the wise woman way. That is not the way of the wisdom path. The wisdom path is about breathing in and allowing yourself to receive the medicine of the multidimensionality of this life, of this world, and the world behind the world. That is the spirit realm of the spirit and the ancestors and your guides and your angels that are watching over you. And that's, that's the wisdom path. That's the way to get our joy back.
All such good reminders. I want to say I spent, my late teens, early 20s experimenting with all sorts of different spiritual practices, meditation, self-help books, and everything. And I don't feel like I ever really put any of it into practice. I mean, I tried, but there was so much worry, like you said about previously, like about the past or the future. It was so hard for me to actually stay present. I want to say the only time I ever really felt present was when I was maybe playing a sport or something like that. And besides that, I've had so much anxiety, but I only feel now that I'm just beginning to like have days where I'm just present, or at least moments of days where I'm fully present. And I could totally see how you said at the end of your life, someone could still have that experience of being fully present in the moment, and just, a lot of the anxiety, just all of the anxiety washes away if you're staying fully present. So, oh, Seraphina, you're doing such great work. Thank you for
Thank you.
all of these reminders, and just I'm really excited for the folks that do end up taking your class and learning from you and all the different ways you share and teach and holding space for people. So really, really appreciate that.
My pleasure. Thank you, Mason. It's been such a joy to sit with you, and I can feel your medicine. I can feel what you're doing in the world and how it's medicine for you personally, and you're giving so much, and it comes through everything that you do. I see that.
Thanks. I'll try not to worry about it every time after I record a podcast if I sounded dumb or something like that. Yeah, like you said though, early on in your journey, it's all about consistency and repetition, and you build confidence that way. But Yeah, still learning a lot. So I really appreciate you saying those kind words. That means a lot to me. One more time, why don't you share where people can check you out? Instagram too, right? You said at Seraphina Capranos.
Yeah, Instagram, Seraphina.Capranos, and our website, the Center for Sacred Arts. And you can also find me at SeraphinaCapranos.com.
Awesome. I'm really excited to publish this one, Seraphina. Thank you. Yep. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so much for watching today's episode of the Herbalist Hour. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want more great herbal content, be sure to subscribe to our HerbRally YouTube channel. If you enjoy these Herbalist Hour episodes and you'd like to join us live, you can do so by becoming an HerbRally Schoolhouse member. Learn more at herbality.com/schoolhouse. And if you want to get your first 30 days for free, use coupon code YouTube30 at checkout. So our HerbRally Schoolhouse members get access to exclusive video classes, monographs, and a lot more herbal community discounts, along with joining these live Herbalist Hour interviews. So one more time, herbality.com/schoolhouse, enter coupon code YouTube30 at checkout to get your first 30 days for free. All right, we'll see you in the next episode, and take care.